I'm just on my way to the crag to try a project, and I thought I'd make an episode to start a little series about things that have really helped me to climb harder. Because when I started out in climbing, I was really terrible at it. And I am also starting to work on a book where I go through all of the ideas, all of the things that I think have made me climb harder. It's only with hindsight that I've really realised what factors actually really helped me make that progress. So there are a lot of different strands to this, so it will actually be quite a few different episodes. But in this one, I want to focus on one which I think is maybe one of the most important, which was being a very shy, unconfident and not very able kid when I was at school. My school years were, to be perfectly honest, a little bit of a painful experience for me up until about the age of 15 and a half. When I was much younger, like younger than 10, I was pretty naive and I didn't really think about these things. But I think maybe when I moved to secondary school at age 12, I really became acutely aware of differences between myself and from other kids. Why there were differences, that's another story. One potential one was that I didn't really have any time with my father. I didn't see my father at all between the ages of 5 and 10, and I think I was sorely missing that role model in my life. So I certainly wasn't a very tough kid, that's for sure. I'd just never been taught how to be, at least not in the masculine sense of the word. In other senses of the word, I definitely was quite tough and quite able, although I just didn't know it yet. But one thing I didn't really have was physical confidence, and I was quite shy and quite awkward. And so it didn't really come naturally to me to make a lot of friends at school, to be confident in asserting myself in the kind of playground situation, or confident at sports at school. And so I tended to be one of those kids that stepped back and was very shy. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that in itself. I actually still quite like being like that. But in the school situation, it does lead to being humiliated and picked on a little bit. Unfortunately, the world of being a kid can be quite harsh. But although I didn't appreciate it at the time, I think in later years this turned out to be a major advantage for me. So in those years, maybe between the ages of 10 and around 14, I got really used to failing at things, especially physical things like sports or things that needed a sense of assertiveness to make progress. I was generally always the last or nearly the last to be picked for things like teams, but down the line that tendency not to be picked for things ended up being an advantage because I had to pick myself. You're forced to pick yourself. So I picked myself in order to entertain myself, in order to set myself challenges, in order to value the work that I did or achievements that I made, no matter how small or insignificant. And also because I wasn't very good at sports and used to people not expecting me to be good at sports, I was very used to failing, but crucially I became not afraid of failing. I became so used to it that I was no longer afraid of it at all. And being fearless about failure can be a really powerful tool in the right context. So if you have the context of you're not afraid to fail, you expect to fail, and therefore you let yourself fail and you let yourself not try, then it doesn't really work. But if you then take that fearlessness of failure and put it into a context where you're ready to try again and still try to succeed, but at the same time not be scared of failing, then you're in the most powerful position. Actually, people who I think are used to succeeding and used to people expecting them to succeed can be in a more vulnerable position because they're constantly watching that they're not used to failing, they're not used to the pain of it, and so they're always trying to avoid it. And this makes you play the game of progress at any skill in quite a defensive way, and that places limitations on you, and it can put you in quite a weak position. So when I came to climb and I couldn't get off the ground on the easiest climbs that I was starting on, this was not a surprise. I was not bothered by this. It just didn't affect me at all. And in fact, even as I progressed at climbing and started to try harder climbs, and even once I realised that I was actually able to climb quite hard climbs, the idea that I would not be able to do every climb or not be able to do the next climb or not be able to do the routes that I dreamed of doing, that still did not scare me at all. I was just totally comfortable with the idea that if it was hard, then failure is to be expected. But also because I was well used to experiencing failure and processing failure, I understood really well that failure is temporary and that you have another chance, especially on the rock. So maybe you could characterise my early period as a climber as expecting to fail, trying to succeed, and not being not being perturbed or put off by the failure when it did actually happen. And then as I grew in confidence and ability and understanding of how to improve at climbing, I would expect to succeed, but still not be surprised if there was failure, but just understand that that failure was temporary. And so when they do occur, they just have never bothered me. I have never had a problem with it. And I see so many of my peers in climbing really struggle with this. Like, they struggle to try projects, they struggle with the idea they might not do it, and that has just never bothered me. And I do attribute it to those early years of experiencing that a lot. I had to go through a fair bit of pain as a kid to develop that ability to be fearless about failure, but it was worth it in the end. So what if you are now a grown adult and you don't have that, and that fear of failure and fear of committing yourself to hard projects really is an issue for you? What can you do about that? I do think that that is a considerable challenge, and it will not be easy for a lot of people, but I do think that it is a trainable skill and that you can overcome it if you put in enough effort. I always like to think of training at the most basic level that it can reasonably be reduced to, and in my mind this issue of fear of failure comes down to confronting the fact that hard climbs are hard, and if they weren't hard and you just completed them, you would try something harder. So every time I start up a hard project, whether it's committing to, like the project that's sitting above me here now, that I know will at minimum take me months, maybe even years to climb, maybe I'll never do it. It's really not important because it's a hard climb. If I knew I was going to do it, it wouldn't be a hard climb, so it wouldn't be what I'm looking for. So whether it's a hard project that takes a long time, or whether it's a single attempt when you start up on your on-site or your red point and you're dealing with the idea, what if I don't do it? What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? It's just an attempt. You can have another one, not on this exact climb if it was an on-site, but you can try it on the next climb. The world is full of rocks. You always have another chance. Of course, life and opportunities to climb is finite. At some point there won't be another chance, but what can you do but just take the chances you do have? There's one thing that's guaranteed in sport performance, and that is that anxiety about the outcome will make you fail. It will make you perform worse. A certain level of anxiety is good, but in many cases people will do well if they just dial that intensity down a little bit and they get into that sweet spot. The earlier you confront the idea that hard things have an inevitable uncertainty to them, and that some failure is inevitable, if temporary, the better. So as I say, I think this aspect was only one of a whole series of key ingredients for me that helped me to progress from a very poor climber, very unconfident, very shy, to a much more competent climber later on. So I will explore some of the other ideas in future episodes, and if you want to catch those, do subscribe to my channel. And I will also write these down in a book, I think. For now, I'm going to put my harness on and see if there's any dry holds on my project. Let's go.